Okay, so we've been working outside all day today, so thinking about what we were going to have for dinner. So today I'm going to be making spaghetti and meatballs. So typically this meal takes a little bit longer to do, so it's normally a weekend thing because I do like to cook the meatballs in the sauce. So that takes a little bit of time. Otherwise, I do have some other ways that I make homemade sauce, but it's faster, so just kind of depending on the day. But since it's the weekend, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit more involved. So to start this sauce, you're going to need 4 of the large cans of crushed tomatoes. Now, some people are really particular about their brands of tomatoes that they use. I'm not. I've tried every single one in the store pretty much, and I didn't really notice a difference in quality with those. So whatever you can find, whatever you have. Some people use home canned tomatoes. You know, it all works. These are 28 ounces, so if you're using quarts, you know, that's fine if you home canned. So you would use 4 of those. You need 2 cans of tomato paste, Vidalia onion. You'll chop this up. Some garlic. Unfortunately, I don't have any fresh garlic from the garden from last year. So hopefully once that comes in, so next year I won't have to buy garlic, but we just get that at Costco. Some basic spices for this: red pepper flakes, some bay leaves, and fennel seed. And of course you can see the wine here. If you're making your own homemade sauce, it really makes a huge difference if you put wine in it. Not a whole lot, it only needs about a cup, maybe a little bit more than that. So this is wine that we actually made ourselves. We will do a video on how we make the wine at some point, but we haven't started a new batch of wine yet. So this is the wine I just picked to use today in the sauce. So I'm going to go ahead and get started chopping my onion. So there's no rhyme or reason to how to chop the onion. It doesn't have to be super finely diced. Just whatever. A rough chop is good. Okay, all of our onions are chopped. So we're going to take this over to our pot. Okay, so we're going to just add some olive oil to the bottom of the pan. I don't really measure that, as you can see, just kind of put enough in there to kind of coat up what you're doing. So then you're going to add the onions to this. And then you're going to let that cook for a couple minutes. It'll take a little while before it gets kind of warm. I didn't preheat the pan. Okay, so like I said, we are going to use some wine in the sauce. Sometimes when I cook with wine, I also have a glass. Okay, let's face it, I always have a glass, but I find it makes me a better cook. It's a pretty good year. Okay, so while I'm waiting for the onions to cook a little bit, I'm going to start opening up these cans. Okay, so the onions have been cooking for a couple minutes, so now it's time to add the garlic. Again, no measuring. Just plop some in there. It doesn't really matter how much. I like a lot of garlic, and quite honestly, you can't really have too much, in my opinion. But you can use as little or as much as you want. And you're just going to mix that up. Now, the reason you don't put the garlic in earlier is because it can burn pretty easily. So you want to watch it a little bit just to make sure that it's well coated in the oil and that it doesn't burn. Okay, so next we are going to add the fennel seed. And you just kind of put a little sprinkle of this. It doesn't have to be a lot. I kind of put it in my hand first just to make sure I don't put too much in there. Well, fennel seems like an odd spice to put in spaghetti sauce. It kind of is like a black licorice taste, kind of, but it works really well with the acidity of the tomatoes. And you'll just let that cook. Okay, so now we're going to add these tomatoes. This is, again, the crushed tomatoes. I believe this one has basil in it, but some of them are just plain crushed tomatoes. That's fine too. Like I said, I'm not super particular about the tomatoes. So there's 4 of these large cans. This makes quite a lot of sauce, which is really good. Sauce and meatballs freeze wonderfully, and it's really good for a quick dinner once it's frozen. And then just give that a little stir. Okay, so we added the crushed tomatoes, so now it's time for the tomato paste. So you're gonna put 2 cans of that in there. You wanna try to use some kind of plastic or silicone thing because you don't wanna scrape the insides of cans. Now most cans now are BPA free, but I don't know. I don't like the idea of using a metal utensil in them, so. Well, tomato paste is going to help thicken it up, which is really good because when you make your own homemade sauce with just crushed tomatoes, sometimes it can be a little watery. Now this doesn't mix up super well at first because it has to heat up, so it's okay if it stays kind of in big pieces and it'll eventually kind of meld together. Okay, next we're going to add just a little bit of the crushed red pepper flakes. You can add as much of this as you want. It doesn't necessarily make it spicy. It just kind of adds a little bit of flavor depth to it. So I don't, as you can see, I don't measure a whole lot of stuff for this. Just a few on the top. And then you also need to put in 2 bay leaves. So these can sometimes be a little tricky to get out. They're not very big. I might put 3 in since they're kind of small. That one's pretty big. All right, that's good. And that's just going to add a little bit of flavor depth to your sauce, and you'll take those out when you go to serve the sauce. And now the best part is when you add some red wine. Now again, like I said before, you can just add about a cup. I don't measure. What I usually do is pour it in, and you'll see it'll start to kind of come up to the top after you pour it in. That's about good. You want to make sure you leave plenty for the chef. That makes the food taste better. And then you'll just mix that up. Still good. Okay, so we're moving on to the meatballs. So when I make meatballs, I like to use a mixture of ground beef and ground pork. You can use all of beef, all pork, turkey, you know, whatever you like to do, but I like the mixture of the two. I feel like it gives a better texture to the meatballs. So we're gonna have, this is a pound and this is a little over a pound, so that's fine. You can do whatever you have on hand is fine. See if I can get these open without making a mess. Okay, get the ground beef in the bowl. All right, and then we'll get the ground pork in there. So you're going to need, since we used a little over 2 pounds, you're going to use about a cup of breadcrumbs. Any kind of breadcrumbs is fine. These are panko. It doesn't matter. Again, it works with whatever you have. As you can see, I actually did measure this just because I want the texture to be right. You're going to add a little bit of garlic. I'm going to grab a spoon. Okay, and then a little bit of garlic. Not as much as I put in the sauce, just a little bit in these. Then we're gonna add oregano, about 2 teaspoons or so, but again, I don't really measure it. I kind of just pour it in my hand and guesstimate. We've all kind of seen, you know, if you've cooked at all, you probably know that's probably about a teaspoon. So I'm gonna put 2 of those in there. And then salt and pepper. I don't measure this either, just kind of grab a little bit. That's probably about a half a teaspoon. About the same with the salt. So we also need to add 2 eggs. Now, unfortunately, these are not our homegrown eggs. Our girls are not laying eggs yet, although fingers crossed, they're getting big. These are from our neighbor, so we're fortunate that our neighbor has chickens and he's very generous with the eggs. So these are 2 eggs from his hens. So we're gonna add those in there, hopefully without shell. All right, and then you're gonna mix that up. I like to do it by hand. I'm gonna take off my jewelry. And you just kind of want to mix it all together. Make sure you're evenly distributing those eggs. I always try to only use one hand when I do this. That way I always have a clean hand in case I need to do something else. Okay, so it's time to make the meatballs. All of the meat is mixed together. So I just kind of grab a hand of it. You can make them as big or as little as you want. Sean likes to say that I make little mini meatloaves, and just for the record, my photographer, aka my husband, drank the rest of my wine that was in my glass, so I don't know, we might be short on love in these meatballs because gotta keep the cook happy. And they kind of float a little bit in the top of the sauce at first. So I keep it down really low heat at this point, and then once I get them all in, I will turn the heat up, and that will help kind of so that they won't fall apart as you stir the sauce. All right, we're getting to the end of the meatball mixture. You can see the pot's getting a little full. That's okay, it'll be fine. As it thickens up as it cooks, it'll kind of cook down a little bit. You just want to be careful that you're not kind of stirring it too hard or anything because the meatballs will fall apart. Okay, I barely squeezed all of the meatballs in there. You can see it's very full. So at this point, you don't really want to stir it, like I said, because they will kind of fall apart. So I usually just kind of push them down a little bit into the sauce. I'm trying to get a little bit of sauce on the top of each meatball if you can. It's okay if it's not completely covered, but just enough that you can kind of like that. So then I'm going to turn the heat up a little bit. I have it on pretty low right now. I'm going to turn it up and I am going to put the lid on it. Let that cook for a few minutes. Once it kind of starts boiling a little bit, then I will come check it, turn the heat back down, stir it, and keep the lid off at that point. All right, it's been about 10 or 15 minutes, so I'm gonna go ahead and check on the sauce. So you can see it started to kind of boil a little bit. I turned the heat back down, and now I'm just gonna kind of gently stir it. Just enough to kind of move the meatballs around. And then you'll make a mess like I just did, but that's okay. It's coming along lovely. All right, so meatballs in total will take about an hour to cook within a sauce. I'm gonna leave the lid off for now and just kind of keep an eye on it. Let me push this little bugger down there. Okay, now we just wait. Okay, so we eat pasta sometimes. We try not to eat a whole lot of it. So this is our alternative. So if anyone knows what this is, kind of looks like a melon. It's not, it's a spaghetti squash. So I'm going to show you a really easy way to cook this. We're going to use the lovely Instant Pot here. I resisted buying an Instant Pot for years because I have so many kitchen gadgets and they take up so much space and all of those things. But this thing has been really helpful in making certain things and cutting your cooking time, you know, in half, if not more. So normally, before I got the Instant Pot, I would cut the spaghetti squash in half. You're going to scrape out the seeds. It's kind of like a pumpkin on the inside, so you'll get the seeds out. And then you would just put them in a baking dish with a little bit of water, cover it with foil, bake it about an hour, hour and 20 minutes, somewhere around there. Sometimes it takes a really long time in the oven. I think you can do it in the microwave too. I've never done that, but the oven was what I used before. But so instead of being an hour and 20 minutes, the actual cook time in the Instant Pot is only about 7 minutes. Now it'll take a little time to get up to pressure and then to cook it, so maybe about 20 minutes in total, but it comes out perfect every time. So that's what I'm gonna do. So it doesn't have to be perfect as far as like making sure it's in half equal parts and that sort of thing. You just need to get it in half roughly. Kids, don't try this at home. Holy moly, this squish. I should start working out. Oh my goodness. And I'm spent. Where's my wine? This is why you gotta keep wine at hand. Okay, so when you look at the inside, you can see it's very similar to a pumpkin with the seeds and everything. So you're just gonna take a spoon and scrape all that out, and then it'll be ready. That's all you have to do. I'm not even gonna worry about cutting this end off because it doesn't have much of a stem. Sometimes you have to cut it off because it won't fit in the pot, but these should be fine. All right, well, as you can see, sometimes this doesn't go exactly as planned, but that's okay. A little mess never hurt anybody. So you just want to get as much of this stuff out of here as you can. Probably could roast these seeds like you do a pumpkin. I don't know, I've never tried it. Kind of looks just like them. Or you could be really creative and save them and plant them once they dry out and get your own plants. Okay, so we're all set. You can see we got our squash cleaned up. Got my Instant Pot on. You see that it says off on there. So it has different things on there that you can see. So I'm going to take the lid off first. It'll make a sound. Okay. Pretty cool. You can put the lid on the handle to hold it. So all Instant Pots come with these little trivets that you can put in there, and that's what you want because you don't want anything touching the bottom because it may burn, and you'll get a notice on the front that says burn. So you're gonna add about a cup of water into the bottom. And then you're just gonna put your squash halves in there. Again, no rhyme or reason. As long as they're in there, they're good. And then we'll put the lid back on. Okay. So at the top of the Instant Pot, there's this valve. So it either goes in this position, which is the venting, or this one is sealing. So when you're cooking, you want it on sealing, and then after it's done cooking, you will release the steam and you'll put it to the venting, and I'll show you that once it's all finished. So make sure it's on the sealing part, and then you're gonna just set the timer on here on the front. Okay. So you're gonna hit the pressure cook, maybe. Why is it doing that? Oh, pressure cook. I hope if I can actually see, I'm hitting the wrong button. So you're gonna put this up for 7 minutes, and it'll start on its own. You don't have to hit anything else. Okay, so the timer just went off. You'll see down here, it has that L and then the zeros, so the time is done. And now it's switched to just being keep warm. So what we need to do with this, it's called a quick release. So you're gonna release the valve over to the venting section. You have to use a spoon or something because the steam will start to come out, and it's extremely hot. You can get burned. And it comes out pretty forceful. So. Like a day at the spa. Not really. Okay, so I released all the steam, and this little red valve that's next to the steam release valve went down. So that lets you know whether it's at pressure or not. So it went back down, it's flush with the top, so we can it's safe to take the lid off. So you just kind of twist it and then take it out. So you can see the squash in there. We're just gonna scoop one out. It has a little water in it, so I'm gonna try to dump that a little bit. Come on, you little bugger. All right. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the magic happens. And this is why it gets called spaghetti squash. So, funny story with spaghetti squash. You know, we had 4 kids in the house when they were all younger, and I made a spaghetti squash casserole, and it was like with chicken and spinach and like a homemade Alfredo sauce. And no one knew that it was spaghetti squash, I swear. So 4 kids, 3 of them being teenage boys, they had no idea, and they devoured it. So it's really a good substitute. Is it the same? No, it's not exactly the same. The texture is going to be a little bit different, but it's a really good switch if you want to try to change things up instead of just having pasta. Right, so spaghetti squash, a couple little things to know about them. They will keep fresh for a long time. They're generally a fall crop. They take a long time to grow, but then they will stay good for you all winter long if they're kept in a cool, dark place. So if you have a good, cool pantry or something like that. The other thing to keep in mind, if you're not going to grow them and you go to buy them, you want to make sure that you are looking at the pricing, because sometimes you can find them for as little as $1 a piece. Sometimes they're by the pound. So I've seen them where they're like $3 a pound, which is crazy. This was probably about 1.5 pounds. This squash, I would guess, somewhere around there. But I've seen them as low as $1 a piece at Aldi. So something to keep an eye out for. Okay, we are ready to eat, finally. It smells amazing in here. So we're going to start with some spaghetti squash. All right. Can't have spaghetti and meatballs without some cheese. All right. Let's see how it turned out. The meatballs are cooked perfectly. They're nice and soft. Excellent. You might not want to videotape this. It's going to end up with danger. I don't think this knife is sharp enough. Holy cannoli.
Okay, I'm videotaping you yelling at me. All right, whenever you're ready.
All right, everybody. So we've been working outside all day.